Started to hear all of these strange rumors about something big coming up, but I didn't know.
Environmental lawyer Nick Leonard had been working for years, joining a many decades-long fight against the Detroit Incinerator. He was working on an incinerator emissions violations lawsuit in March of 2019 when he heard the news.
And so, like everybody else, I found out with the press release from the company. And then just like that, it was done. And it was an unbelievable moment, an unbelievable feeling.
7 months after the shutdown, and the environmental groups are officially celebrating. An old building on Detroit's Near East Side, converted into a community center, serves as a temporary gallery of protest against the incinerator, now history, just a quarter-mile away.
It's hard for environmental justice folks to stop their work and celebrate because it's like the work never ends.
While passing out flyers for the event, KT Andreski learned some of her neighbors didn't know the incinerator closed, but they did notice they weren't smelling garbage anymore.
We're excited about the celebration that we're having on today, that we celebrate the closing of the incinerator. Yeah. And I know that a lot of you have been a part of that battle, and a lot of you have been a part of that war. And sometimes it seems like it's an unwinnable battle, but it turns around, we have God, truth, hard work, and justice on our sides.
We've been breathing this stuff from the incinerator my whole life. I'm 42 years old. I breathed it my whole life. We smelt it our whole life.
So may as well start off with one of our anthems, right? Ooh, we shall not be moved just like a
In 1988, Detroit filmmaker Joel Silvers documented one of the many incinerator protests. Back then, the concept of environmental justice was just getting started.
So people were like, it's been there for decades. You know, it's going to be there for decades more. It's not like people have been trying to shut this thing down for 30 years. What makes you think that we're going to do it? But, you know, the more that we looked at it with, you know, just looking at how the facility functions, how it operates, and just all of the problems that it was having complying with air emissions limits, we couldn't figure out how they were allowed to operate.
I would go so far as to say that's the real reason that the incinerator closed. It was a failed business model.
And what we found out was it was dirtier than the coal-fired power plants that were being retired in terms of every pollutant, in terms of sulfur dioxide, greenhouse gases, mercury, all of these pollutants. And so, you know, did we know all of these things when we built it? Probably not.
It was a simple solution, but it was also a very expensive solution. And we've lived through that experience.
From can to curbside. That's about all the thought most of us give to garbage.
When the city opened the incinerator in 1986, there were worries we were running out of landfill space. Serving Metro Detroit, even Canada, it turned out Detroiters were paying more for waste disposal than the suburbs in their own facility. It remains part of then-Mayor Coleman Young's legacy.
He was convinced that it was somehow going to add to cleansing. It was just the reverse. It became the largest incinerator in the country, and it added to the asthma attacks. It added to the toxicity, and it added to the contamination of the air, the water, and the soil.
They burdened the city with a debt which was 20 years long, and counting the interest, it was $1.2 billion. That's a huge amount of money. And according to some analysis, it was a huge factor into the city becoming bankrupt.
The city of Detroit sold the incinerator to a private operator in 1991, and it's had other owners before Detroit Renewable Energy took over last year.
In this case, the impact was everything went there. Then there were no options to think about saving anything from the waste stream because you had to feed the fire. So it precluded thinking anything else.
I think that this incinerator shutdown basically speaks to the type of city Detroit wants to be. We want to be a sustainable city, or we want to continue with the old, dirty, industrial way that the city's always been.
With Detroit's garbage now going to landfills, these activists are directing efforts toward waste reduction and recycling. More issues to deal with now the incinerator is off the list.
The fight continues to go. The fight is never over until we have total clean air.
That's what I think makes it this really unique environmental story, because it was This group that was built on the shoulders of previous groups and community residents and just continued the drumbeat throughout the history of the facility and eventually got to the point where they won. That's a remarkable story.